Alter.
Thank you, sir. My question is to the Minister for Education. How will the government respond in practice to recommendation 22 of the Royal Commission? And with your leave, sir, and that of the House, I'll explain.
Leave your sorties, leave granted. Member for Murray Alter.
Thank you, sir. Recommendation 22 is to establish an early childhood workforce fund to increase supply of early childhood staff. The Commission notes that a 3-year-old preschool will require 660 extra teachers in government and non-government settings and nearly 1,000 extra other qualified staff on top of current shortfalls and vacancies. While the government has announced it has accepted this recommendation, it's unclear how the fund will generate the 2,000 extra staff required by 2026.
Minister.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Murray Alter again for his question on the Royal Commission. And his question does go to the heart of one of the areas of the rollout of 3-year-old preschool that will be the most challenging for government. We know that. There is a huge workforce component to delivering 3-year-old preschool, and that includes, as the member for Murray Alter correctly identified, an extra 660 early childhood teachers, an extra 880 early childhood workers, and an extra 120 additional staff, which will in some cases be preschool directors. And in specific response to the member's question in regards to the workforce fund and how we are planning on actually rolling that out, the first commitment that we have made towards getting that started is $500,000 of initial funding to create a sector-wide workforce strategy, which I know is going to be, and the member for Murray Alter says that won't be enough, and I'm not here saying that's all we're going to provide, but we obviously need to start these things very quickly, and that's what we're doing. And I think, as I said in my answer, Mr Speaker, to the member for Murray Alter's very first question this afternoon, we know that huge reforms like this have challenges and can be hard. So often the things in government and public policy that deliver the biggest change and most meaningful change to people's lives are hard and not easy. If they were easy, they would have been done already. But what government can look at the data that we are surrounded by now around a national average of 22% developmental vulnerability and South Australia at 23.8%, and over the last number of years heading in the wrong direction. And then on the other hand, see all the data that exists now, which has grown and grown and grown year in, year out, that shows the difference that an extra year before school can make. What government turns away and says it's too hard? What government, Mr Speaker, puts it in the too hard basket and doesn't take action? Now, the member for Murray Alter is right. There are challenges here. He has identified some of those. But in terms of the workforce strategy in particular, I understand that one of the recommendations is to have a coordinator general, which is something we'll be doing as well, someone to coordinate all that work around making sure we can deliver on the workforce that we need. But the $500,000 of initial funding to create that sector workforce strategy is just the first step. Now, I would also point out, Mr Speaker, because the question from the member for Murray Alter really goes to those workforce challenges, that we haven't waited until Sunday when we publicly released the Royal Commission report to start the work on recruiting the workforce that we need. I mean, some of the election commitments that the Premier and Deputy Premier made and designed out of opposition go to the very heart of what we're going to need to create and attract that extra 660 and 880 staff. And it includes things like returning early childhood education and care to the metropolitan TAFE campuses, which had been stopped by those opposite when they were in government. And I know that the uptake in those courses has been very, very popular.
Order. Minister has the call. Minister.
And in addition to that, Mr Speaker, fee-free TAFE, we secured very early, within about 8 or 9 months of coming to government, we struck a 1-year agreement with the Federal Skills Minister, Brendan O'Connor, for 12,500 fee-free places. 10,500 of those were for TAFE. Early childhood education and care, of course, were included in that as well, and they have also been popular, and we have basically already expended all those 12,500 fee-free places. Such was the uptake of them. And on top of that, 5 technical colleges that we're building around the state. The first to open, Mr Speaker, in Findon, that I know the member for Cheltenham is very excited about. 3 streams, one of those streams, early childhood education and care.
Member for Murray Alter, and then the member for Torrens. Member for Murray Alter.
My question is to the Minister for Education. Can the Minister offer guarantee that the government will not poach staff from non-government early education services in order to meet its preschool staffing requirements? And with your leave and that of the House, I'll explain.
Leave your sorties, leave granted. Member for Morialta.
Thanks, sir. The Royal Commission highlights that workforce shortages exist in both public and private sectors today, and these will be substantially exacerbated by the 3-year-old preschool policy. Given the proposed model requires most working families' children to receive their preschool education in non-government services, the model won't work if non-government staff are poached by the department. The Royal Commissioner highlights the advantageous working conditions within the public service compared to non-government services.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. And of course, what Minister for Education or Early Childhood would want to poach staff from other areas, particularly such an important area as this? And of course, it is our ambition that we do not do that. And again, that goes to the heart of the Royal Commissioner's recommendation around both the Workforce Fund, but also having a coordinator general for that workforce strategy as well, to try to find ways that we can actually grow the pie instead of cannibalising the workforce of other areas. Now, part of doing that, of course, goes to the answer I gave in the last question about things that we have already done immediately after coming to government in March last year around fee-free, technical colleges bringing courses back to TAFE, because those things that we've done there are about creating a bigger workforce. They are not about necessarily dragging people who are in those roles in the existing workforce or other employers, whether it's the for-profit or not-for-profit sector, and bringing them into the public sector. It is about encouraging other young South Australians or mature-age South Australians who might look at a career change to move from the career they are currently in and take up early childhood education and care. So it is certainly my hope, and this will be one of the things that our Workforce Coordinator General is tasked with, is making sure that we are focused on meeting those targets around the 660, the 880 and the 120 by actually growing the workforce. And I might say it is the same attitude that we have taken in terms of the teacher workforce as well. We have states like Victoria who are offering very large incentives, up to $30,000 to attract teachers from across the border. I have raised at the National Cabinet table with other education ministers and Jason Clare in front of the Victorian Minister, that I think that is a poor way to approach things, and if we are to have a truly national approach to both education but the early years, it shouldn't be a case of some states offering enormous incentives to take staff from across the border. We should all be focusing on actually growing the pie in our own states, and that's what South Australia is doing with teaching, and it's exactly the same kind of method and approach we're going to take with the early years in terms of how we meet the workforce commitments contained within the Royal Commission report.